Welcome to my channel, the hidden drama where real-life stories unfold and every situation has a lesson. Some will surprise you, some will make you think, and some might feel closer to home than you expect. Now let's get into today's story. My daughter refused to let me see my grandchild after I lost my job. I begged outside her gate for days. She called the police on me and said I was a threat. As I sat in the cold, I left a letter in her mailbox that said the truth about what happened years ago. I never thought I would end up sitting on a freezing curb at 62 years old, begging to see my own grandson through metal bars while my daughter looked at me like I was a stranger she feared. "Dad, you need to leave," Elena said, her voice sharp and final. The gate clicked shut with a sound that felt like the last door in the world closing. Through the bars I could see her clutching Lucas against her shoulder, his small fingers tangled in her hair. "I just want to see him," I said, and I hated how my voice broke on those words. 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking." "No," she said flatly. "You've done enough." Then the porch light went out and I stood there in the dark like an idiot, hands wrapped around cold metal, watching the windows go dark one by one. 10 minutes later, blue and red lights painted the quiet street, and I knew she had actually called the police on me. "He's trespassing," I heard Elena tell the officers through the gate, her voice steady and sure. "I'm afraid of him. Afraid of me, my own daughter." I sat on that curb while a young officer with kind eyes gently explained that I had to leave the property or they would arrest me. My pride had always been my armor, the thing that kept me standing when everything else fell apart, but it had also made me sharp-tongued and stubborn, incapable of admitting when I was wrong or when I needed help. Even now, humiliated and broken, I refused to just disappear. So the next morning I came back with a folding chair and a thermos of gas station coffee, and the morning after that, and the one after that. "See, my name is Victor Hale, and I used to run a respected logistics company before I lost everything in a scandal that cost me my job, my reputation, and eventually my family. For 15 years people crossed the street to avoid me. For 15 years I carried the weight of a crime everyone believed I committed. My daughter Elena had cut me off years before all this, back when my pride made me criticize every choice she made, every friend she brought home, every dream she shared. I had been a difficult father, always thinking I knew better, always pushing, never listening. When I went to prison she was 20 and she never visited once. I told myself I understood. I told myself it was better this way. But now I had served my time and lost everything, and all I wanted was 5 minutes with the grandson I had never met, and she would not even open the gate. My stubbornness would not let me accept that. My pride insisted I deserved at least a conversation, so I sat outside her house day after day, becoming the neighborhood spectacle, the crazy old man everyone whispered about. On the 4th night, after another visit from the police and another door slammed in my face, I did something I should have done years ago. I wrote down the truth. Not all of it, never all of it, but enough. I slid the envelope into her mailbox with shaking hands and walked away into the cold November darkness, not knowing if she would even open it. The letter said things I had never been able to say out loud. It said the embezzlement scandal that destroyed my company 15 years ago was not actually my crime. It said I had been framed. It named the man who destroyed me, the man who threatened my daughter's life if I fought back, the man who forced me to confess to crimes I did not commit and spend 5 years in federal prison to protect her. The letter named Gerard Calloway, my daughter's father-in-law. The man whose son she had married, whose family she had joined, whose home she now lived in. I wrote that Gerard had used my company as a pipeline for laundering money during a federal investigation, that when authorities closed and he planted evidence to frame me, that he came to me in my office late one night and laid it out plain and simple. "You can fight this and watch your daughter disappear," he had said, his voice calm and reasonable. "Or you can take the fall quietly and she lives a normal life. Your choice, Victor." I had chosen her life. I had chosen silence. But the letter also explained why I was coming forward now, why I was risking everything by breaking that silence. Because I suspected Gerard was doing it again. Because I had been watching the news about my son-in-law Daniel's growing tech company, and I recognized the patterns, the same financial structures, the same shell companies, the same careful architecture of fraud. Gerard was using his own son the same way he had used me. And if I was right, history was about to repeat itself and my daughter's husband would take the fall just like I did. The letter ended with words that cost me everything to write. "I stayed away because I thought it protected you. But if I'm right, history is about to repeat itself. I need you to look into your father-in-law's finances. I need you to see what I see. And I need you to believe me, even though I have given you no reason to trust me for the last 15 years. 3 days passed with no response. I kept coming back to the gate, but Elena would not even come to the door anymore. I saw curtains move when I arrived. I knew she was watching. My pride screamed at me to give up, to stop humiliating myself, but my stubbornness had always been stronger than my pride and I could not walk away. Then on the 7th day the gate opened. Elena stood there holding my letter, her face unreadable. "Get in the car," she said. We drove in silence to a coffee shop 3 towns over where nobody knew us. She ordered black coffee, I ordered the same. We sat across from each other like two strangers negotiating a hostage situation. "I looked into what you said," Elena finally spoke, her voice tight and controlled. "I found old financial records from Gerard's companies around the time your scandal happened. There are patterns, shell corporations, transferred assets, things that don't make sense. Did you confront him?" I asked. "Not yet," she said, "because if you're lying to me, if this is some scheme to get back into my life or con money from Daniel's family, I will make sure you never see Lucas. Ever, do you understand me?" "I understand," I said and meant it. "But Elena, I need you to know something else. Gerard is dangerous. If he finds out you're looking into this, if he thinks you know." "Then what?" she interrupted. "He'll threaten me like he threatened you, make me disappear." Her voice dripped with sarcasm, but I could hear the fear underneath. "Yes," I said simply. "Exactly that." She went quiet, stirring her coffee in slow circles. When she looked up, her eyes were wet, but her voice was steel. "I need more than patterns, I need proof, real evidence that will hold up." "Then we need to go deeper," I said. "We need to access files Gerard has locked away, financial records he never made public, the same kind of evidence he planted to frame me." "How do we get that?" Elena asked. "We can't just break into his office." "No," I agreed, "but your husband can." She shook her head immediately. "Daniel doesn't know anything about this, I can't drag him into." "He's already in it," I interrupted, and my temper flared the way it always did when people would not see the obvious truth. "Gerard is using Daniel's company right now. Your husband is going to be the next victim unless we stop it." "You don't know that for sure," Elena shot back. "You're guessing, you're paranoid because of what happened to you." "I spent 5 years in prison watching men like Gerard operate," I said, my voice rising. "I know exactly how they work. They find someone clean, someone trustworthy, someone with a growing company, and they infiltrate. They use legitimate businesses to move dirty money. And when authorities come knocking, they sacrifice the person whose name is on the paperwork. That's what Gerard did to me. That's what he's setting up with Daniel. And you can choose to believe me or you can wait until federal agents show up at your door." The coffee shop had gone quiet. People were staring. Elena's face was flushed with anger and embarrassment. "Keep your voice down," she hissed. "This is exactly why I cut you off. You always think you know everything. You always push and push until everyone around you breaks." She was right and I knew it, but my pride would not let me admit it in that moment. "I'm trying to protect you," I said. "Like you protected me before," she asked bitterly. "By disappearing for 15 years, by letting me think you were a criminal and a liar, by never even trying to explain." "I couldn't," I said. "Gerard made it clear." "Gerard isn't here right now," Elena's voice cracked. "You could have written me from prison. You could have called when you got out, you could have tried. But your damn pride wouldn't let you admit you needed help or that you made mistakes raising me. So instead you just vanished and let me hate you." The truth of her words hit me like a fist. She was right. Gerard had given me an excuse to disappear and my pride had helped me take it. I had told myself I was protecting her, but really I was protecting myself from having to face my failures as a father. "You're right," I said quietly, and the words felt like broken glass in my throat. "I failed you long before Gerard framed me. I was a terrible father. I was controlling and critical and I never listened to you. And when everything fell apart, I used Gerard's threat as an excuse to run away instead of fighting for you. I'm sorry, Elena, I'm so sorry." She wiped her eyes quickly, not wanting to cry in public. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she said. "I don't know if I even want to try." "I understand," I said, "but right now we have a bigger problem. We need to protect Daniel before it's too late." She took a long breath and nodded slowly. "Okay, tell me what we need to do." Over the next 2 weeks, Elena and I worked together for the first time in 20 years. She convinced Daniel to give her access to his company's financial systems under the pretense of helping organize records for tax season. Daniel, who adored his wife and trusted her completely, handed over passwords without question. What we found made my stomach turn. Gerard had been systematically using Daniel's tech company to move money through a network of shell corporations, exactly the way he had used my logistics firm. The amounts were larger this time, the scheme more sophisticated, but the bones were the same. Gerard was preparing to collapse the whole structure and let Daniel take the fall. We need to make copies of everything, I told Alina as we sat in her home office late one night, scrolling through files on her laptop. Financial transfers, emails, corporate documents, anything that connects Gerard to these transactions. This is enough to reopen your case, Alina said, her voice shaking slightly. This proves he framed you. Maybe, I said, but I care more about protecting Daniel and you and Lucas. Gerard can't be allowed to do this again. My hands were shaking as I helped Alina organize the evidence, partly from anger, partly from fear, but also from something else. Hope. For the first time in 15 years I had a chance to clear my name and protect my family, but my impulsiveness nearly ruined everything. 3 days before we planned to take the evidence to federal investigators, I made a mistake. My pride got the better of me and I drove to Gerard Calloway's office unannounced. I wanted to see his face. I wanted him to know I had not forgotten. I wanted him to know he had failed to destroy me completely. The receptionist tried to stop me, but I pushed past her and walked straight into Gerard's glass-walled office on the 14th floor. He looked up from his desk, older now but still sharp, still in control. "Victor Hale," he said calmly, like he had been expecting me. "I wondered when you might show up." "I know what you're doing," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "I know you're using Daniel the same way you used me." Gerard smiled slightly and stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. "You should leave before I call security." "I have proof," I said, and the words came out before I could stop them, before I could think about whether I should reveal my hand. My impulsiveness, my need to see him react, overrode all common sense. "I have documents showing the shell corporations, the money transfers, everything, and I'm taking it to the authorities." Something flickered in Gerard's eyes, not fear exactly, calculation. "You're bluffing," he said. "Alina helped me find it," I continued, my pride making me want to prove I was right. "She has access to Daniel's files. We have everything we need to prove what you did 15 years ago and what you're doing now." Gerard moved slowly to the window, hands in his pockets, looking out over the city. When he spoke, his voice was quiet and dangerous. "You made a mistake coming here, Victor. You made an even bigger mistake involving your daughter." "Are you threatening her?" I demanded. "I'm stating facts," Gerard said calmly. "Alina has accessed confidential corporate information without authorization. She's committed several felonies by copying those files. If this evidence becomes public, she goes to prison, not me, her." My blood went cold. I had not thought about it that way. I had been so focused on exposing Gerard that I had not considered the legal consequences for Alina. My impulsiveness had put her at risk. "You're lying," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "Am I?" Gerard turned to face me, his expression pleasant and unbothered. "Think about it, Victor. Those files Alina accessed belong to Daniel's company. Gerard is a separate entity with his own legal protections. Any prosecutor looking at this will see a scorned daughter-in-law illegally accessing corporate files to frame her father-in-law. The fact that you, a convicted felon, are involved only makes it look worse. You've handed me the perfect defense and destroyed Alina's life in the process." "No," I whispered. "You can still make this right," Gerard said, moving closer. "The same deal as before, walk away, destroy the evidence. Tell Alina to forget what she found, and I'll make sure she doesn't face charges. I'll even help Daniel's company survive when the investigation comes. But if you go to the authorities, I will make absolutely certain Alina takes the fall. Your choice, Victor, same as last time." I left Gerard's office in a daze, my pride shattered, my impulsiveness exposed as the fatal flaw it had always been. I had walked right into his trap. I had given him ammunition against Alina. I had made everything worse. When I told Alina what happened that night in her kitchen, she went pale. "I can't go to prison," she whispered. "Lucas needs me, Daniel needs me, I can't." "I know," I said, my voice hollow. "I'm sorry, I should have thought before I confronted him. I should have kept my mouth shut. This is my fault." "We can still go to the authorities," Alina said, but I could hear the fear in her voice. "We have the evidence. They'll see Gerard is the real criminal." "Will they?" I asked. "Or will they see a convicted felon and his daughter illegally accessing corporate files to get revenge? Gerard has expensive lawyers and powerful friends. We have documents obtained through illegal means. Who do you think a prosecutor will believe?" Alina put her head in her hands. "So we do nothing, we just let him get away with it again." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw the woman she had become despite my failures as a father. Strong, intelligent, fierce, but also vulnerable and scared and human. I had already let her down once by staying silent. I would not do it again. "No," I said. "We do something smarter. We beat Gerard at his own game." Over the next week I put together a plan that used every dirty trick I had learned in prison, every piece of knowledge about how men like Gerard operated. My plan required patience, which had never been my strength. It required me to swallow my pride and manipulate people, which felt wrong but necessary. Most importantly, it required me to use myself as bait. I started by reaching out to a federal investigator named Sarah Chen, who had worked on my original case 15 years ago. She had always believed something was off about my conviction, but never had enough evidence to pursue it. I told her I had information about Gerard Calloway, but I wanted immunity for myself and Elena before I shared anything. She was skeptical but interested enough to set up a meeting. Then I did something that hurt my pride more than anything. I went to Gerard and pretended to surrender. "You win," I told him when I showed up at his office again, making my voice sound defeated and broken. "I destroyed the evidence. Elena is backing off, we're done." Gerard studied me carefully. Just like that, I said. "I'm 62 years old, I'm tired, I don't have the energy to fight you anymore, and I won't risk Elena going to prison, you made your point." "Smart choice," Gerard said, but I could see he did not fully believe me. "If I find out you're lying, if I discover you kept copies of those files." "You won't," I interrupted, "because I'm done. I just want to see my grandson sometimes, that's all I want now. Maybe you could convince Elena to let me visit occasionally, that's all I'm asking." I hated the begging tone in my voice, but I needed Gerard to think I was broken, that I had given up completely. He considered this and eventually nodded. "I'll talk to her. But Victor, if you ever come after me or my family again, I will destroy you and everyone you love. Are we clear?" "Crystal clear," I said and walked out. What Gerard did not know was that our entire conversation had been recorded on a device Sarah Chen had given me. What he did not know was that while I was in his office surrendering, Elena was meeting with Sarah Chen and providing testimony about everything Gerard had told her, everything I had told her, and everything we had found in those files. What he did not know was that I had made copies of every document before telling him they were destroyed. And what he really did not know was that Sarah Chen had been building a case against him for years, waiting for someone on the inside to finally come forward. My false surrender was the last piece she needed to get a warrant. 3 days later, federal agents raided Gerard Calloway's offices, his home, and several properties connected to his shell corporations. They seized computers, files, financial records, everything. Gerard was arrested at his country club in front of all his powerful friends. The news coverage was immediate and brutal. When Daniel found out what his father had done, what Elena and I had been investigating, he was devastated. "I had no idea," he kept saying. "I didn't know he was using my company. I didn't know about any of it." Elena held him while he cried, and I stayed in the background, giving them space. I had done what I needed to do, but I did not expect gratitude or reconciliation. The trial took 8 months. Gerard's lawyers were as good as I expected, but the evidence was overwhelming. The recordings of him threatening both me and Elena, the financial documents showing the shell corporations and money laundering, testimony from other victims who had been too afraid to come forward before. And finally, Sarah Chen's testimony about irregularities in my original case that she had never been allowed to fully investigate. Gerard Calloway was convicted on 17 counts including fraud, money laundering, racketeering, and witness tampering. He was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. He would die there. He was 68 years old and his health was already failing. As part of the plea agreement, my original conviction was overturned. After 15 years, I was officially cleared of all charges. The news outlets called it a tragic miscarriage of justice. They interviewed me and called me brave. They wrote articles about flaws in the legal system. But I knew the truth was more complicated. I was not entirely innocent. I had stayed silent when I should have fought. I had let pride and fear control my choices. I had abandoned my daughter when she needed me most. And there was something else nobody knew, something I had never told Elena or Sarah Chen or anyone. Gerard had framed me, yes. He had planted evidence and forced me to take the fall. But I had been stealing from my own company first. Just small amounts at first, skimming money to cover bad investments and gambling debts that my pride would not let me admit to anyone. Gerard had discovered what I was doing and used it as leverage to pull me into his scheme. When he needed a fall guy, he had chosen me because I was already guilty of something. He just made sure I took the blame for his crimes instead of my own. I never went to prison for what I actually did. I went to prison for what Gerard did, but I had still been a thief. I had still been weak and dishonest, and that truth stayed locked in a drawer in my apartment, written in a letter I would never send. The consequences of Gerard's conviction rippled outward in ways I had not fully anticipated. Daniel's tech company survived but was damaged by the scandal. He had to testify against his own father, which broke something in him. He became quieter, more withdrawn, less trusting. Elena threw herself into supporting him and raising Lucas, building routines and control around her life like armor. She was cordial to me now but not warm. I was allowed supervised visits with my grandson once a month. Lucas called me Victor, not Grandpa. That hurt, but I understood. On a cold afternoon 6 months after the trial ended, Elena invited me to a park where she was meeting Lucas for a playdate. She sat on a bench next to me while Lucas played on the swings. "I still don't fully trust you," she said without looking at me. "I don't know if I ever will, but I believe you about Gerard now, and I'm glad you stopped him before he destroyed Daniel the way he destroyed you." "Me too," I said quietly. "You did the right thing," Elena continued. "Despite how you went about it, despite your impulsiveness and your pride, you protected our family in the end." "I did what I had to do," I said. "But Elena, I need you to know something. I'm not the hero everyone thinks I am. I made mistakes long before Gerard came into my life. I was not a good father to you. I let you down in ways that had nothing to do with him." "I know," Elena said. "I've known that for a long time, but you're here now, you're trying, that's more than nothing." She stood up to push Lucas on the swings, leaving me alone on the bench. I watched my daughter and grandson together, this small piece of redemption I did not deserve, and I felt the weight of everything I had done and not done pressing down on my chest. Later that night I sat in my apartment staring at the locked drawer where I kept the second letter, the one containing the full truth about my original crimes. The letter I had written years ago as a confession I never had the courage to share. My pride still insisted some truths should stay buried. My stubbornness still insisted I had earned my second chance through what I had done to stop Gerard. But another part of me, the part that had grown during those freezing nights outside Elena's gate, knew I was still lying by omission. I pulled out the letter and read it for the 100th time. It detailed everything: the gambling debts, the embezzlement from my own company, the lies I told my wife before she left me, the way I blamed everyone except myself for years, the way Gerard had leverage over me because I was already guilty of theft. I had told myself this letter was my insurance policy, my way of maintaining some honesty with myself even if I could not share it with others. But really it was just another form of pride, another way of controlling the narrative. If I truly wanted redemption, I needed to give Elena the whole truth and let her decide what to do with it. But I could not do it. My pride would not allow it. My fear of losing the small connection I had rebuilt with her and Lucas was too strong. So I folded the letter back up and locked it in the drawer again. Maybe someday I would find the courage. Maybe someday Elena would ask questions I could not deflect. But for now, I chose the easier path. I chose to let people believe I was the victim who fought back, the father who sacrificed everything for his daughter, the man who brought down a corrupt manipulator through courage and determination. I let them believe the simplified version of the story where I was basically good and Gerard was basically evil. The truth was messier. We were both guilty, he was just more guilty than me, and I had used his crimes to hide my own. 3 months later I received an unexpected call from Daniel. "We need to talk," he said, his voice strange and tight. We met at the same coffee shop where Elena and I had first conspired against Gerard. Daniel looked exhausted, like he had not slept in days. He placed a folder on the table between us. "What's this?" I asked. "Open it," he said. Inside were financial records from my old company, documents I had never seen before. My hands started shaking as I realized what I was looking at: evidence of my original embezzlement, the small thefts I had committed before Gerard framed me for larger crimes. "Where did you get these?" I whispered. "Gerard's lawyers," Daniel said. "They're trying to negotiate a reduced sentence by providing evidence that you weren't completely innocent. They found your financial discrepancies buried in old files. They're going to make this public unless we give them what they want." My whole body went cold. "What do they want?" "They want Elena to recant her testimony," Daniel said. "They want her to say she was coerced by you into making false statements. They want to create reasonable doubt about Gerard's conviction." "Elena will never do that," I said. "I know," Daniel agreed. "But they're going to release this information anyway. They're going to tell the world that you were already stealing from your company, that Gerard didn't completely frame you, that you're not the innocent victim everyone thinks you are." "It's true," I said quietly. "I know," Daniel said again. "I had my own forensic accountant review these documents. They're legitimate. You were embezzling money before Gerard came into the picture." We sat in silence for a long moment. Outside, ordinary people walked by living ordinary lives, unaware of the disaster unfolding inside this coffee shop. "Does Elena know?" I finally asked. "Not yet," Daniel said. "I wanted to talk to you first." "Why?" I asked. Why not just tell her? Why give me a heads up? Daniel leaned back in his chair, studying me carefully. Because despite everything, despite your flaws and your mistakes, you stopped my father from destroying more lives. You saved my company and possibly kept me out of prison. You did something genuinely brave even though your motives weren't entirely pure. And I think you deserve the chance to tell Elena the truth yourself before she hears it from Gerard's lawyers. My throat felt tight. She'll never forgive me, not for this. Maybe not, Daniel agreed, but you'll finally be telling her the whole truth. Isn't that what she deserves? He was right and I knew it. I had been given a second chance at redemption and I was wasting it by continuing to lie. My pride had trapped me again, had convinced me I could selectively reveal truths and hide the parts that made me look bad. But real redemption required complete honesty, even when it cost me everything. I'll tell her, I said. Tonight. Daniel nodded and stood to leave. For what it's worth, Victor, I don't think you're a bad person. I think you're a complicated person who made bad choices and then tried to fix them. That's more honest than most people manage. After he left, I sat alone with the folder, knowing my carefully reconstructed life was about to collapse. Gerard's lawyers would release this information regardless of what I did. But Daniel was right. Elena deserved to hear it from me first. That evening I called Elena and asked her to meet me at her house after Lucas was asleep. She agreed reluctantly. When I arrived, she let me in without a word and we sat in her living room surrounded by all the markers of the life she had built. Family photos, Lucas's toys, evidence of the normalcy she had fought to create. Gerard's lawyers have evidence that I was embezzling from my company before he framed me, I said without preamble. They're going to make it public. Elena's face went very still. Is it true? Yes, I said. I was stealing money to cover gambling debts, not much at first, but Gerard found out and used it as leverage. He didn't completely frame me. He just made sure I took the fall for his crimes instead of my own small thefts. I let everyone believe I was innocent because it was easier than admitting the whole truth. You lied to me, Elena said, her voice dangerously quiet. Again? Yes, I said. I did. You let me help you build a case against Gerard. You let me risk everything to expose him. You let me testify in court, and you were lying the whole time about being completely innocent. I was guilty of smaller crimes, I said, but Gerard was guilty of much larger ones. That part was true. He did use my company for money laundering. He did threaten you. He did force me to take the fall. I just left out the part where I had already given him leverage by stealing from my own business. Elena stood up, packing the room, her hands shaking with rage. Do you understand what you've done? Gerard's lawyers are going to use this to discredit my testimony. They're going to say I was working with a known thief to frame an innocent man. They're going to appeal his conviction. I know, I said, and I'm sorry. I thought I could protect you from this truth. I thought if I just focused on Gerard's crimes, my smaller ones wouldn't matter, but I was wrong. I was selfish and proud and I put you at risk again. Get out, Elena said. Elena, please, get out of my house right now or I will call the police and this time I won't feel guilty about it. I stood slowly, my body feeling heavy and old. I meant what I said before, about being sorry for failing you, about wanting to be better. But I kept failing anyway because I couldn't let go of my pride. I'm sorry, Elena, I'm so sorry. She did not respond, just stood with her arms crossed, waiting for me to leave. I walked to the door and paused. For what it's worth, bringing down Gerard was still the right thing to do. He would have destroyed Daniel and many others if we hadn't stopped him. My motives may have been partially selfish, but the result was real. He's in prison because of what we did. That matters, even if I'm not the hero everyone thought I was. The hero I thought you were didn't exist, Elena said quietly. You're just a flawed man who kept making selfish choices and calling it protection. Get out. I left and drove back to my apartment, knowing I would probably never see Lucas again, never have another chance with Elena. The media coverage started the next day. Gerard's lawyers released the financial documents showing my original embezzlement. News outlets that had previously called me a tragic victim now ran stories questioning my credibility. Legal analysts debated whether this evidence could lead to Gerard's conviction being overturned. Sarah Chen, the federal investigator, called me furious. You didn't tell me you were stealing from your own company, she said. You let me build a case without knowing the full truth. Gerard's crimes were still real, I said. I know that, she snapped. But you compromised this investigation by lying about your own involvement. His lawyers are going to tear apart everything we built. Will his conviction stand? I asked. Probably, she said after a pause. The evidence against Gerard is overwhelming and your testimony was only one piece, but this makes everything harder, and it makes you look like exactly the kind of person who would fabricate evidence for revenge. She hung up. Daniel called next. Elena is devastated. She's questioning everything now. She thinks maybe Gerard was right about you all along. I never lied about what Gerard did, I said. Just about what I did. That distinction doesn't comfort her, Daniel said. And honestly, it doesn't comfort me either. We trusted you, Victor. We put everything on the line to help you, and you were using us just like Gerard used you. That's not fair, I started to say, but Daniel interrupted. Isn't it? You wanted revenge on Gerard and you saw an opportunity to get it while also clearing your name. You didn't care that you were putting Elena at risk legally. You didn't care that you were asking us to trust you when you were still lying. You just cared about winning. He was right. My pride had convinced me I was doing the right thing, but really I had been using my daughter to settle my own scores and rebuild my own reputation. Even my revenge had been selfish. Tell Elena I'm sorry, I said. I don't think she wants to hear from you again, Daniel said and hung up. For the next week I stayed in my apartment, watching my life fall apart again through news coverage and social media. People who had praised me as brave now called me a con artist. Former supporters said I had manipulated everyone. Gerard's lawyers filed an appeal claiming their clients' rights had been violated by testimony from corrupt witnesses. Through it all I thought about that second letter locked in my drawer, the full confession I had never had the courage to share. I had been given multiple chances to tell the truth, and had chosen deception every time. Even when I tried to do the right thing by exposing Gerard, I had done it in a way that protected my own image and hid my own crimes. My pride had poisoned every choice I made. Then something unexpected happened. 3 weeks after the scandal broke, I received a letter from Elena, not an email or a text, an actual handwritten letter delivered by mail. I opened it with shaking hands. Dad, it began, and I almost cried at seeing that word instead of Victor. I've spent the last few weeks trying to figure out what I actually think about everything that's happened. I've been angry and hurt, and I've questioned every moment of our investigation and every piece of trust I placed in you. Daniel and I have had long conversations about whether we can ever feel safe around you again, but I keep coming back to one simple truth. Gerard Calloway was a dangerous man who destroyed lives and would have continued destroying lives if someone hadn't stopped him. You helped stop him. Your motives were complicated and selfish, and you lied about your own crimes. But the result was still real. Gerard is in prison, Daniel's company was saved, other potential victims were protected. That matters. It doesn't excuse your lies. It doesn't mean I trust you or that I want you in my life the way I briefly considered. But it means something. You did a real good thing even though you did it imperfectly with mixed motives while also doing some bad things. Most people never manage that much. I don't know if we'll ever have a normal relationship. I don't know if Lucas will ever call you Grandpa, but I wanted you to know that despite everything, despite all your flaws and lies and selfishness, I'm glad you came to my gate that cold night and refused to leave. I'm glad you pushed me to investigate Gerard even though your reasons weren't pure, because the outcome was worth it. Maybe that's the best any of us can hope for, to do something genuinely good despite being genuinely flawed. You're not forgiven, but you're not entirely condemned either. That's the most honest thing I can tell you. Elena, I read the letter 5 times. It was not absolution, it was not reconciliation, but it was more than I deserved. It was acknowledgement that life and morality and redemption were all more complicated than simple narratives allowed. I thought about writing back but decided silence was better. Elena had said what she needed to say. Anything I added would just be my pride trying to manage the situation again. Instead, I finally took out the second letter, the full confession I had been hoarding for years, and I did something terrifying. I sent it to Sarah Chen with a note saying she could use it however she thought appropriate for the public record. If my crimes were going to be exposed anyway, I might as well control the narrative one final time by telling the whole truth myself. The investigator called me 2 days later. This doesn't change Gerard's conviction, she said. His crimes were far worse than yours and well documented independently of your testimony, but it does complete the record. I know, I said. Will you charge me with the embezzlement? The statute of limitations expired years ago, Sarah said, and technically you already served time for crimes connected to that company even if the specific charges were wrong. But this letter will become part of the public record. People will know the full truth. Good, I said and meant it. The letter was published as part of court filings the following week. More media coverage, more public judgment. But this time I did not watch obsessively or care what people said. I had told the truth, all of it. There was nothing left to hide or protect. Gerard's appeal was denied 3 months later. His conviction stood. He remained in prison serving 25 years. Daniel's company slowly recovered from the scandal. Elena continued building her life with her husband and son, keeping me at a distance but not cutting me off entirely. We exchanged emails occasionally. Brief updates about Lucas, nothing deep or emotional. It was not what I had hoped for, but it was realistic and honest, and maybe that was more important than warmth. On a cold December evening, a year after everything had fallen apart and rebuilt itself in a different shape, I received one more unexpected message. It was from Daniel. Lucas is having a birthday party next weekend. Elena says you can come if you want. You don't have to, but the invitation is there. I sat with that message for a long time, weighing whether my presence would help or hurt, whether my pride was telling me I deserved to be there or whether I actually did. Finally, I responded. Tell Lucas happy birthday from me, but I think it's better if I don't come. Maybe in a few years when things are less complicated. Thank you for offering. Daniel replied immediately. Elena thought you would say that. She says that might be the first actually selfless choice you've made regarding our family. She means that as a compliment. I smiled at that, a real smile that reached somewhere deep. Maybe Elena was right. Maybe learning to step back, to let them heal without my interference, to accept my limited role without demanding more, was the real redemption I needed. Not the dramatic confrontation with Gerard or the public clearing of my name, or even the painful confession of my own crimes. Just the quiet choice to cause no more harm. To let my daughter live her life without my complications. To be available if needed but not demanding if not wanted. It was not the ending I would have written. The hero does not end up alone in a small apartment with limited contact with his family. The hero gets forgiveness and warmth and a restored relationship, but maybe I was never supposed to be the hero. Maybe I was just a flawed man who caused harm and then tried inadequately to fix it, who helped expose real evil while also being guilty of lesser evils himself, who learned too late and too slowly how to tell the truth and let go of pride. And maybe that was okay, maybe being imperfectly better was enough. Gerard Calloway died in prison 8 months later of a heart attack. There was a brief mention in the news. I felt nothing, not satisfaction, not grief, just a sort of distant acknowledgement that a chapter had closed. Elena sent me a short text. Gerard's funeral is Thursday. We're not going, just wanted you to know, I replied. Thank you for telling me. I'm not going either. Some things don't need closure. She sent back a single word. Agreed. That was the last direct communication we had for several months, but a few weeks ago, on what would have been my 64th birthday, a package arrived at my apartment. Inside was a small framed photo of Lucas at his birthday party, smiling at the camera with frosting on his face. On the back, Elena had written a brief note. He asked about you. I told him you were someone who made mistakes but tried to fix them. He thought that was okay. Maybe someday you can tell him the whole story yourself, when he's older, when you're ready, no pressure, just possibility. I put the photo on my mantel, the only decoration in my sparse apartment, and I thought about possibility, that small fragile thing I had almost destroyed through pride and deception and impulsiveness. I had spent so much of my life trying to control narratives and protect my image and prove I was right. And all it had done was isolate me from everyone I cared about. The real courage had not been exposing Gerard, or confessing my own crimes, or sitting outside, that gate in the cold, demanding to be let in. The real courage was learning to sit with uncomfortable truths about myself, to accept that I was not and never would be the hero of this story, to live with the consequences of my choices without making excuses or deflecting blame, to let my daughter and grandson exist at whatever distance they needed without guilt-tripping them or demanding more. That was harder than anything I had done before, but for the first time in my life, I was trying to do the hard thing not because it benefited me or cleared my name or satisfied my pride, just because it was right, and maybe eventually that would be enough. Maybe possibility would slowly become reality, or maybe it would not. Maybe this distant, complicated, carefully boundaried relationship was all I would ever have with Elena and Lucas. Maybe I would stay in this small apartment watching their lives from a distance, occasionally receiving brief updates, never fully welcomed back into the family. Either way, I had stopped demanding more than I deserved. I had stopped pretending to be better than I was. I had stopped hiding the ugly parts of my story to protect my reputation, and in a strange way, that felt more like redemption than any dramatic confrontation or legal victory ever had. Just the quiet acceptance of being exactly who I was, flawed and honest and trying and failing and trying again, without the armor of pride to protect me from the truth. It was not the revenge story I set out to tell. It was something messier and more real. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments, I'd love to hear them. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next story.